Hello, I'm going to read for you Tales from the Shadows by Devra Newberger Speregen. Me or my shadow? This is the cabin? 12-year-old Stuart Kenner stared at the rundown cabin in front of him. This is where we're sleeping tonight? He couldn't believe his eyes. It's a dump, he exclaimed. Stuart's father came up behind him. Oh, come on, Stu, he said. It isn't that bad. Stuart curled his upper lip in disgust, then looked at his friends. He could tell from their expressions that they thought the cabin was pretty bad, too. Dan Hirsch, Stuart's best friend, spit out a huge wad of chewing gum which landed on the ground. Yeah, a dump, he grumbled. It sure looked different in the brochure, said Alex Summers, another of Stuart's buddies. Alec tossed his backpack on the ground and picked up his portable CD player. Does it even have electricity? He asked. Mr. Kenner shook his head. Guys, I told you when you signed up for the scouting overnight. We were roughing it. No electricity, no running water, just us and nature. Stuart rolled his eyes. He still couldn't believe they'd driven for 3 hours just to stay in some run-down cabin in the middle of nowhere. He pulled his backpack from the van and set it down on the ground. Well, at least it's a chance to use my new backpack, Stuart thought to himself. The Trail Sport Ultra Deluxe steel-framed camping knapsack had been a gift from his parents on his 12th birthday. It was pretty cool. Lots of secret compartments and pockets, and even its own Swiss Army compass attachment. Mr. Kenner, a shy, quiet voice suddenly spoke out. What time is it? Stuart made a face. Don't you wear a watch, Garrett? He asked. Drake Garrett stared at the ground. He nervously readjusted his black baseball cap. Yeah, but it's broken, he replied. So get it fixed, Stuart said in a nasty tone. Or are you going to be asking us what time it is all night? Mr. Kenner held up his hand. Okay, now listen to me, everyone. We didn't come up here to pick on Drake. Everyone had better start getting along, or they're going to have to deal with me. Is that understood, Stuart? Stuart looked down at the ground. Yes, Dad, he said. Then he shot a look at Drake. What a loser that kid was, with his long, stringy hair and pasty skin. Stuart still couldn't figure out why Drake had to come on the trip. Drake was such a geek, such a weirdo. He seemed to be afraid of everything. He was probably even afraid of his own shadow. But Dad had insisted that Drake be invited to come on the overnight. It wouldn't be fair to exclude him, he said. Drake was a member of the scout troop and had the right to go on the overnights like everyone else. Stuart, Ben, and Alec were surprised Drake had even wanted to go on the trip in the first place. For one thing, Drake never hung out with them, probably because they gave him such a hard time. Stuart knew that sometimes he could be pretty mean to Drake, but he couldn't seem to help it. Drake always acted so weird, like how he wore that dumb baseball cap every single day. He wore it with the flap in the back. Stuart wondered if he ever took it off. Alec joked that Drake probably showered with it on, if he showered, that is. Another reason they thought it was weird that Drake had been willing to go camping with them was that Drake never seemed to go anywhere, except for school and troop meetings. Drake lived on Stuart's block, 2 doors away, in fact. But Stuart had never seen him outside playing, even once. Okay, Troop, Mr. Kenner finally said, let's check out the inside of the cabin. Good idea, Dad, Stuart said. Make sure the last overnight scout troop isn't decomposing inside or something. Ben and Alex snickered, but Stuart noticed Drake turned a bit green in the face. What's the matter, Drake? Stuart asked. You don't want to share the cabin with a few dead, rotting bodies? Drake stared down at the ground. No, you're just joking, he said quietly. Stuart leaned in real close to Drake and stared into his eyes. Are you sure? He asked gravely. Ben and Alec cracked up. Drake gulped nervously. Cut it out, Stuart, he mumbled. I said that's enough, Stewart, Mr. Kenner said sternly. Get off Drake's case already, guys. Start bringing our stuff into the cabin. Stewart picked up his backpack and opened the door as soon as he stepped inside. A nauseating odor hit his nostrils. The cabin was also a mess, a thick coating of dust on the furniture and floors, dirty dishes in the sink, and stained, moth-eaten mattresses scattered around the room. "Oh, gross!" Stewart cried out in disgust. Alec and Ben came up behind him. "Yuck!" Alec exclaimed, pinching his nose with his fingers. "What is that disgusting smell?" Ben's eyes watered. "Oh, man, I think I'm going to puke." Mr. Kenner followed the boys inside. The putrid odor made him gag. "I don't know what it is," he said, "but it's terrible." "Maybe there's a dead animal somewhere," Ben suggested. Mr. Kenner nodded. "Well, let's see if we can find it and get rid of it," he said. "I'm not searching around for some dead animal," Stewart exclaimed. "I'm getting out of here." He ran back out the door. Mr. Kenner and the boys followed him outside. "You're right," said Mr. Kenner as he closed the cabin door behind him. "Even if we find whatever died in there and get rid of it, the cabin's still going to reek, and the place is filthy besides. We can't sleep in there. I guess there's only one thing left to do." "Go home?" Stewart asked hopefully. Mr. Kenner made a face. "No, Stewart, we didn't drive 3 hours just to turn around and go home. Come on. This is the great outdoors. We're supposed to be roughing it, so let's rough it tonight. We'll all sleep outside." Stewart, Alec, and Ben exchanged looks. "Outside?" they asked in unison. Mr. Kenner smiled. "Sure, we have sleeping bags, so what's the problem? In fact, sleeping under the stars is what camping is all about." For a moment, nobody said anything. Then a small voice spoke up. It was Drake. "Mr. Kenner," he asked, I don't mind the mess or smell in there, really. Can I sleep in the cabin?" Mr. Kenner shook his head. "Don't be silly, Drake. That stench will make you sick." Stewart noticed Drake's face turn even pastier than usual. "But I don't like sleeping outside," Drake said meekly. "I want to sleep inside, please." "Please?" Mr. Kenner shook his head again. "Absolutely not, Drake. I'm sorry, but nobody's going in that cabin tonight. Now don't worry about a thing. You'll be perfectly fine out here with us." What is his problem?" Stewart wondered. Okay, so sleeping outdoors wasn't exactly the best. But why was Drake getting all bent out of shape about it? "There's only a little daylight left," Mr. Kenner went on. "So let's set up camp outside. I saw a small clearing over there," he added, pointing a few yards from the cabin. "It's just enough room for our sleeping bags and a campfire." "A campfire?" Drake asked nervously. Everyone stared at him. "What did you expect?" Stewart asked. "That we were going to cook dinner over the car's cigarette lighter?" "Maybe he thought we would eat it at McDonald's over there in the woods," Ben joked. "No, maybe he was hoping to have a pizza delivered," Alex added. Drake's face turned bright red. "Leave me alone, you guys," he said. "Enough already." Mr. Kenner ordered. "Dad, what are we going to do about food?" Stewart asked. Mr. Kenner searched his pockets for the keys to the van. "We'll do exactly the same thing we'd do if we were staying in the cabin," he said. "We'll cook. Only we'll cook over a campfire instead of a stove. I'll drive over to the general store we passed a ways back and get some food and additional supplies. You boys start collecting firewood." Drake's head jerked up in alarm. "You mean you're leaving us, Mr. Kenner?" he asked nervously. "Out here? All alone?" Mr. Kenner put an arm around Drake's shoulders. "I told you not to worry, Drake," he said. "You guys will be just fine. I'll be back soon." Then he hopped into the van and drove off. "Yeah, don't worry, Drake," Stewart said mockingly. "We'll be just fine." "But it's getting so late," Drake said quietly. "Yeah, so what?" Alec asked. "You afraid of the dark or something?" "Something, whatever. Where are we?" Drake shook his head. "No," he said uneasily. "No, I'm not afraid of the dark. It's just—" Stewart smiled evilly. "So that's it," he exclaimed. "You are afraid of the dark. That's why we never see you outside at night. Let's quit there. We'll start again on page 12. All right. Thank you for watching, if you did.